Clarissa Whitmore was the flawless Southern belle, and Reverend Daniel Mercer was the town's golden preacher. But when their secret affair was exposed during a church baptism, it shattered the perfect illusion of hidden pines. Days later, Reverend Mercer was found dead in the Whitmore garden, and Clarissa stood at the center of a murder mystery that left the town questioning everything they thought they knew about faith, power, and betrayal. In the quiet, sun-drenched town of Hidden Pines, Texas, the Whitmore family lived like royalty. Their estate was the most impressive in the area, an enormous mansion framed by towering oak trees, a circular driveway lined with roses, and a black iron gate that creaked open as if announcing their wealth to anyone nearby. From the outside looking in, William and Clarissa Whitmore were the very picture of Southern success. William had built his fortune in the oil industry, founding a drilling company that quickly expanded across the state. He was disciplined, conservative, and famously private. Clarissa, on the other hand, was the town's shining jewel, elegant, polished, and endlessly active in community affairs. Her hair was always perfectly styled, her smile unwavering, and her presence demanded attention the moment she entered a room. Together they were a power couple, admired by churchgoers, envied by neighbors, and respected by all. Their estate served as the backdrop to many high society events: charity galas, garden luncheons, political fundraisers. If it was important in Hidden Pines, it was probably happening at the Whitmore house. And Clarissa was always at the center of it, pouring sweet tea with diamond-covered hands and laughing at just the right volume. No one could ever imagine her life being anything but perfect. To the church community, she was a woman of deep faith. She chaired the women's Bible study group, volunteered with the youth ministry, and had a reserved pew right up front every Sunday at Grace Baptist Fellowship. Whenever a new family moved to town, Clarissa would be the first to welcome them with homemade peach cobbler and an invitation to church. But behind the tasteful floral arrangements and curated image, something wasn't quite right. While William and Clarissa appeared harmonious in public, those closest to the family, employees, drivers, housekeepers, noticed a growing distance between them. William was often away on business, and when he was home, he kept to himself. He'd spend hours alone in his study or walking the perimeter of the property. He rarely attended church, and when he did, he sat in the back, as if he didn't want to be noticed. Clarissa, meanwhile, filled her days with increasingly busy church commitments, often staying late for meetings or events. There were whispers, of course, but nothing concrete. In towns like Hidden Pines, secrets don't last forever, but they do take their time unraveling. Some neighbors speculated that Clarissa was simply bored, having no children and a husband who was more interested in stock prices than conversation. Others believed she was lonely, despite the constant attention she received. A few more cynical voices hinted at infidelity, but without proof, these suspicions remained locked behind polite smiles and passive glances. Then came Reverend Daniel Mercer. Young, magnetic, and full of energy, Reverend Mercer had recently been hired by Grace Baptist Fellowship to replace the aging senior pastor. Within weeks, he breathed new life into the congregation. His sermons were passionate, his ideas fresh, and his appeal undeniable. The younger members loved him for his approachability, and the older members admired his fire and brimstone conviction wrapped in a modern style. Clarissa was quick to take him under her wing, offering to help him acclimate to the town and make connections within the community. Many applauded her for mentoring the new pastor. Only a few wondered if her interest in him extended beyond spiritual guidance. As spring approached, Clarissa and Reverend Mercer were often seen together, leading youth retreats, planning mission trips, and coordinating charity events. Still, no one dared question her intentions. Not yet. The lines between propriety and something more had begun to blur, but Hidden Pines was still clinging to the illusion that everything in the Whitmore household was just as perfect as it had always seemed. What they didn't realize was that beneath the surface of Sunday dresses and silver serving trays, the first cracks had already formed, and it was only a matter of time before everything began to break. The Sunday morning of the baptism was one of those flawless spring days that seemed made for celebration. The sky was cloudless, the air crisp, and the town of Hidden Pines buzzed with anticipation. Grace Baptist Fellowship was packed to the brim with well-dressed families, city officials, and even a few journalists from the local news channel. Among those to be baptized was the mayor's teenage daughter, which elevated the day's importance from routine to historic. Everyone wanted to be seen there. It wasn't just a religious service, it was a social event. Children squirmed in their seats, grandmothers adjusted their hats, and the choir rehearsed behind the scenes in hushed, reverent tones. Clarissa Whitmore arrived early, as always. She wore a pale blue dress that complemented her perfectly styled blonde hair, and pearls that shimmered subtly under the stained glass light. She moved through the crowd like royalty, offering gentle hugs, whispering blessings, and smiling as though nothing in her world was out of place. She took her usual seat in the front pew, reserved specifically for the Whitmore family by unspoken town tradition. Her posture was flawless, her expression serene, but her eyes kept drifting to the stage where Reverend Daniel Mercer stood adjusting his robe, preparing for the service. Reverend Mercer looked every bit the part of a rising star in the ministry. Tall, youthful, and confident, he had a natural charisma that drew people in. Older women adored him, teenagers idolized him, and young mothers felt unusually drawn to his kind eyes and gentle voice. As the church lights dimmed and the music began to play, all eyes turned toward the baptismal pool at the center of the sanctuary. It was set into a small alcove, framed by white curtains, softly glowing under overhead lights. Reverend Mercer stepped into the water barefoot, his robe floating around him. He began the ceremony with warmth and passion, calling each candidate by name, dipping them gently beneath the water and offering prayerful blessings. Then, without warning, something unexpected happened. The church's live-stream camera, mounted in the back for homebound parishioners, zoomed in just as Clarissa reached out from the front pew toward the stage. Her hand brushed against Reverend Mercer's as he passed by. It was a fleeting moment, barely noticeable to those in the sanctuary, but it was captured with unsettling clarity by the camera. Her touch lingered half a second too long. Her expression, though composed, revealed something softer, something intimate. The live stream ended as planned, but the clip was soon posted online by an eager viewer who wanted to share the beautiful service. Within hours, the moment became the center of speculation. What was initially viewed as an innocent brush of hands was scrutinized, dissected, slowed down, and zoomed in on. Some claimed it meant nothing. Others insisted it was too deliberate to ignore. Hidden Pines, a town that thrived on appearances and whispers, found itself consumed by a single question: what exactly was going on between Clarissa Whitmore and the Reverend? The online chatter intensified when an old photo surfaced of Clarissa and Reverend Mercer at a charity retreat the previous year. They stood side by side, smiling, but the closeness of their bodies and the way Clarissa's hand rested on his arm seemed, at least now, suspicious. Suddenly, her frequent involvement in church events was being reinterpreted. Every fundraiser, every private meeting, every shared car ride became a potential clue. People who had once praised Clarissa's devotion to the church now began to wonder if her devotion had been focused elsewhere all along. Despite the growing scrutiny, Clarissa remained silent. She continued attending church, but her once warm greetings grew colder. She avoided eye contact. She stopped hosting Bible studies. Reverend Mercer, too, became more withdrawn. His sermons lost their usual spark. Rumors spread that church elders had met with him privately, urging caution. No official action was taken, but something had shifted. In a single moment, caught on camera and magnified by gossip, the illusion of moral perfection cracked. The baptism, intended as a sacred act of renewal, had instead exposed something deeply human and profoundly flawed. The town of Hidden Pines could no longer look at its most admired woman and its beloved preacher without wondering what secrets they had managed to hide. Until now. In the days following the baptism, the town of Hidden Pines transformed. What had once been a quiet, picturesque community now pulsed with hushed conversations, sideways glances, and a growing hunger for answers. The video clip of Clarissa Whitmore and Reverend Daniel Mercer had been viewed thousands of times. It was all anyone could talk about in church lobbies, beauty salons, and private Facebook groups. People weren't just speculating anymore, they were investigating, and what they began to uncover threatened to dismantle the pristine image of the Whitmores and their church. Clarissa tried to carry on as if nothing had changed. She continued to show up at church, though she no longer sat in the front pew. She attended community meetings, but her warm greetings were replaced with tight smiles and rushed goodbyes. It was clear she was aware of the whispers. More noticeably, William Whitmore had stopped appearing in public altogether. He missed 2 board meetings for his company and canceled a major fundraiser without explanation. His absence was deafening, and it gave weight to the rumors that his marriage was crumbling under the weight of public scandal. Then came the leak that shifted everything from suspicion to certainty. A former church staffer anonymously contacted a local reporter with information. According to her, Clarissa and Reverend Mercer had been meeting privately in his office for months, sometimes well after the church had emptied. She claimed she once returned late at night to grab a forgotten purse and found the door to the pastor's office closed, with hushed voices inside and Clarissa's car still in the parking lot. She left immediately and never told anyone until now. More people came forward after that. A member of the church cleaning crew said he once saw Clarissa's silk scarf hanging on the back of the reverend's chair. A teenager from the youth group said she had overheard a heated argument between Clarissa and Mercer near the side entrance one evening. Then, most damning of all, a local hotel clerk recognized both of them from earlier in the year. She remembered them checking in separately and using different names, but arriving within minutes of each other. The clerk had no proof, but her story was compelling enough to ignite a media frenzy. William, according to close associates, was devastated. One longtime friend claimed he had never seen him so broken. He reportedly hired a private investigator, though this was never confirmed publicly. For a man who built his empire with precision and control, the idea that his own wife had been leading a secret double life was unbearable. The Whitmore estate, once known for its open doors and lively parties, became a fortress. Security cameras were added. The iron gates rarely opened. William was said to have moved into a separate wing of the house. Clarissa remained in the main quarters, rarely leaving the property except to attend church events, though even those began to dwindle. Then came the discovery that couldn't be brushed off or explained away. The private investigator, presumed to have been hired by William, uncovered records of a rental cabin located about 45 minutes outside of town. It was registered under a name that turned out to be fictitious, but the billing address led back to a shell account connected to Clarissa's charity organization. Surveillance photos, phone GPS records, and credit card receipts told the rest of the story. Clarissa and Reverend Mercer had visited the cabin several times over the past year. There were even photos, grainy but damning, showing them entering the property late at night and leaving just before dawn. The town was stunned. The affair was no longer rumor, it was fact. The woman who had once been held up as a symbol of virtue and grace was now the centerpiece of a growing scandal, and the man she had turned to for spiritual guidance was now implicated in a betrayal of both faith and trust. The foundation of Grace Baptist Fellowship had been shaken, and what was once whispered behind closed doors now spilled into the streets, loud and undeniable. Yet no one had any idea just how dark things were about to get. The call came early on a Thursday morning, just after sunrise, when the groundskeeper at the Whitmore estate arrived for his usual shift. As he walked toward the garden gazebo to trim the hedges, he noticed something unusual. Freshly disturbed soil around the rose beds, and a strange smell in the air, metallic and sour. At first, he thought it might be an animal, perhaps a deer or wild boar that had wandered onto the property and died. But as he moved closer, what he saw stopped him cold. Lying face down in the dirt, half covered by a trailing rosebush, was the lifeless body of a man, his shirt soaked in blood, a deep wound in the center of his chest. The horror took a moment to settle in, but the face was unmistakable. It was Reverend Daniel Mercer. By the time police arrived, the estate was in chaos. Clarissa was reportedly in her bedroom, unaware that anything had happened. William was found pacing his study, glassy-eyed and disoriented. Officers quickly secured the scene, cordoned off the garden, and began combing the area for evidence. It was clear the Reverend had died from a single gunshot wound to the chest. There were no signs of a struggle, no visible bruises, and no weapon in sight. Whoever had done this had been precise and quiet. News of the murder spread across Hidden Pines like wildfire. A reverend shot dead on the grounds of the most powerful family in town? It was a story too sensational to believe, and yet it was all too real. Speculation erupted instantly. Some believed it was a crime of passion. Others whispered that it was a message, that someone wanted the scandal silenced before more secrets spilled out. Surveillance footage from the Whitmore estate became the focal point of the investigation. Cameras showed Reverend Mercer's car arriving at the property around 11:43 p.m. the night before. He drove alone and entered through a side gate that had mysteriously been left unlocked. No other vehicles were recorded entering or exiting during that time. The next morning, his car was still parked discreetly near the garden path. Inside the Reverend's vehicle, detectives found a leather-bound journal, his wallet, and a folded letter. The letter, handwritten and addressed to Clarissa, was filled with emotional pleas and obsessive declarations. He begged her to finally leave William, promising that they could start a new life together. He spoke of their connection as something divine, something ordained. But toward the end, the tone darkened. He wrote that he felt used, betrayed, and claimed that if Clarissa continued to reject him, everything would come crashing down. The final sentence chilled investigators. "If you're not mine, no one else will ever have you." Autopsy results confirmed what police already suspected. Reverend Mercer had been killed shortly after midnight. The precision of the gunshot suggested the killer was either trained or extremely deliberate. Forensics found traces of soil under his nails, indicating he had tried to crawl or grab at something before dying. But the biggest clue came a few days later, when a search of the Whitmore residence uncovered something hidden, a secret compartment inside Clarissa's walk-in closet. Inside, carefully wrapped in a silk scarf, was a custom-engraved pistol. The serial number matched a purchase made by William Whitmore 5 years earlier. Ballistics confirmed it was the weapon that killed Reverend Mercer. Clarissa claimed she had no idea the gun was in her closet. She denied ever touching it, let alone using it, but investigators found her fingerprints on the handle, as well as a smear of fresh soil on the scarf. William, for his part, remained completely silent. He refused all interviews and communicated only through his lawyer. The community, already shaken by the affair, now found itself staring into a deeper and more dangerous mystery. Who killed the Reverend, and why? The lines between victim and villain began to blur, and the truth, it seemed, was buried under layers of betrayal, obsession, and desperation. The courtroom was packed to capacity on the first day of Clarissa Whitmore's murder trial. Reporters lined the back wall, sketch artists hunched over notepads, and members of the Hidden Pines community filled the gallery, eager to witness the final act of a scandal that had consumed their lives for months. Clarissa entered wearing a navy nude dress and a blank expression. Her hair was neatly styled, her posture straight, her eyes unreadable. There was no emotion when the charges were read. She stood silent, unmoved, as the prosecution began building their case brick by brick. The prosecutors painted a damning portrait. A woman once revered for her piety and community service, now revealed to be manipulative, calculating, and capable of murder. They described an affair rooted in lust and secrecy, one that spiraled out of control the moment Reverend Mercer demanded more than Clarissa was willing to give. When he became a liability, threatening to expose their relationship, to destroy her reputation, her marriage, and her future, she acted. According to the state, she lured him to the estate under the pretense of reconciliation. Instead, she shot him point-blank, dragged his body to the garden, and attempted to cover the crime with just enough subtlety to cast doubt. The letter found in the Reverend's car was used as proof of emotional instability on his part, but also served to establish motive. The gun, the secret compartment in her closet, and the fingerprint evidence were laid out methodically for the jury. The prosecution also revealed phone records showing a series of late-night calls between Clarissa and Mercer in the days leading up to his death, calls that abruptly stopped the night he was killed. Clarissa's defense team countered with a different narrative. They argued that she was the victim of a disturbed man's obsession, someone who couldn't accept the end of an affair and who may have taken his own life in an attempt to frame her. They suggested the letter was not a threat, but a final, desperate plea from a broken heart. They claimed the gun had been placed in her closet without her knowledge and that the evidence tying her to the crime was circumstantial at best. They reminded the jury that there were no eyewitnesses, no security footage of the murder, and no definitive proof that Clarissa had pulled the trigger. Otherwise, it was a straightforward death. But everything changed in the middle of the second week, when William Whitmore, who had remained completely silent since the investigation began, appeared in court. He looked frail and gaunt, a shadow of the powerful businessman the town once revered. As he sat behind Clarissa, eyes sunken and distant, whispers spread across the gallery. A few days later, during a recess, he collapsed in the hallway outside the courtroom. He was rushed to the hospital, diagnosed with a massive heart attack, and died 3 days later. His sudden death sent shock waves through the trial and left Clarissa visibly shaken for the first time. Yet even then, she did not speak. When the contents of William's will were revealed, they shocked everyone. Despite everything, the affair, the scandal, the murder, he left everything to Clarissa, the estate, the businesses, the assets, no conditions, no final words, just a clean, uncontested inheritance. It raised more questions than it answered. Had he still loved her? Had he known more than he let on? Had he, in some twisted way, tried to protect her? In the end, the jury deliberated for less than 2 days. Clarissa Whitmore was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. She showed no reaction as the verdict was read, no tears, no anger, no apology. As she was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, the room fell silent, as though the entire town had collectively exhaled. To this day, Clarissa has never spoken publicly about what happened that night. She has never granted an interview, never appealed her sentence, and never answered the questions that continue to haunt Hidden Pines. Why did Reverend Mercer go to the estate that night? Did Clarissa truly plan to kill him? Or did something else happen in that garden? Something darker, something only she and William knew. The answers are locked away just like Clarissa, and unless she chooses to tell her story, the full truth may never be known.